Hej och välkommen till korrespondenterna Europa här på Grand Café i Bryssel. Idag ska det handla om inflödet av knark till EU och vad EU egentligen ska göra åt problemet. And with me I have two guests. Very welcome to Chris Davies, Liberal from the UK, and to Sofia Modigh from the Christian Democrats in Sweden. Do we have a drug problem in Europe today? What do you say, Sofia?
Yes, I really think we have. And we have to, in a way, do the same as the US. We have to try to reduce the demands in the cities in Europe.
And what do you think, Chris?
Well, I wouldn't like to draw any comparisons with the US. I mean, 700,000 people are arrested every year in the United States simply for cannabis possession. Their prisons are full of drug offenders, and yet the problem continues. I mean, the reality is that it is prohibition that is at fault, just as it was with alcohol in the US in the 1920s, and it is the driving force behind the drugs trade. It puts huge sums of money in the hands of criminals.
We've just seen the story from Maastricht. Isn't there some merit to this Dutch model? What do you think, Sofia?
No, I don't think it's a good model. I think it increases the drug use, and that's not what we want to.
Well, I disagree, obviously. I think the Dutch have taken a very pragmatic position. They're working within the United Nations conventions, which are really geared to the total prohibition of drugs. And they've found some loopholes. But what they've done really is to separate soft drugs and hard drugs. And you just look at the comparison between, for example, drugs policy and that in the United Kingdom, whereas the average age of a heroin user in the United Kingdom is 19, and in Holland it's more than 40. I mean, they really have created that separation by being sensible about soft drugs.
But they do claim, the Dutch, that they have few deaths actually related to drug abuse. Why are you still shaking your head?
No, I mean that it is very difficult to compare death statistics. There is no international standards of how you define a drug-indicated death. So that's not a good argument to say that Holland is better than other countries. Of course, drug kills people, but that's why we have to help them to stop use drugs.
But just let's remember, what we're talking about in the Netherlands is the separation of soft and hard drugs. And so far as cannabis is concerned, I mean, cannabis is not a killing drug. Alcohol kills, smoking kills. Cannabis may have the same effects as smoking to some degree, but as a drug itself, it's virtually entirely benign. There were hardly any recorded instances in the history of the world of anyone dying from cannabis.
But you make it sound as if the anti-drug laws themselves kill more people than the fact that people are on drugs.
I've never taken an illegal drug in my life, so I'm not pro-drug. But I just think the way in which we approach this issue plays into the hands of the criminals. I mean, it is prohibition which puts the profits, gives the criminals the huge profit motive. It's like a pyramid selling operation. You may start off with cannabis, you may try and encourage people, because in most cases there isn't the separation that you see in the Netherlands, to get addicted to a substance like heroin. And then before very long, people are selling drugs themselves in order to find the money to pay for their next fix.
Legalization is no solution. That won't help. Drugs make people do things that they shouldn't do. They make them commit suicide or crimes.
The policies have been in place internationally now for more than 50 years.
Yes,
and the problem is getting worse, not better. 50 years of doing the same thing suggests that it is not the right way forward.
If you remind the history, the reason why we have these laws today is that it was a worse situation before. We had a free market,
we will
and that
continue
was
the
not
debate
working.
in a second. Hang on, we will continue the debate in a second. Chris, aren't you in any way wanting the EU to patrol its border better to prevent this kind of things we just saw in the story?
Well, we can carry on doing that, but it's just pouring good money after bad. It just goes down the drain. The criminals will always outbid us because, frankly, they've got more money at their disposal. The profit margins are huge. They can corrupt entire countries. And as you know, in Mexico, for example, nearly 7,000 people alone have died in drug wars in the last year or so. So you just have to go back to first principles. It is the prohibition, just like in 1920s America with the gangsters in Chicago and the like. It is prohibition that drives this forward. Instead, you need to move to a complete revision of policy. You need to accept that people are going to do things which are going to cause harm to themselves in some instances, but it is better that than cause harm to the rest of society.
But Sofia, don't you want to make any sort of distinction, like Chris is doing, between softer drugs or harder drugs, and maybe seeing that cannabis, for instance, could be done in the Dutch style across Europe?
No, drug is drugs, and as from my perspective, and as far as I know, the recent surveys done shows that cannabis is a gateway drug. It was a youth conference on that in 2002. So I think that that argument about soft drugs and hard drugs is not true.
But Sofia, you can't honestly say that cannabis and heroin are comparable. I mean, it's just everyone knows this is nonsense.
In a society perspective, of course they have different effects when people use them, but both of them cause behavior, they change the mind of people, and they change people's priorities. People that are stoned on cannabis, they don't take care of their children, they don't
But I can go to a supermarket.
Hang on, Chris. Go on.
They do stupid things. They can't drive cars, as you said earlier yourself, and other things. So cannabis is a serious problem, and often the addiction started with cannabis.
But I can go to a supermarket anywhere outside this cafe and buy a bottle of whiskey. And all these things will be the same. And it's perfectly legal. And yet there isn't the criminality.
And that's enough.
But aren't you taking this addiction thing rather lightly? I mean, it is known that a lot of people, once you've taken your first shot of heroin, you're hooked for life, and most people's lives are a downward spiral.
The harm reduction messages are confused because of the power of the selling operation, which is fed by the money behind it. If it was under government control, government-authorised outlets, you would actually make it very unsexy, very uncool to take these drugs.